The Memphis Grizzlies had lost the first two games of the four-game road trip, but then they went to the six. They went to the six and they beat Toronto Raptors by 8. The Memphis Grizzlies victorious against Toronto Raptors last night. We're going to tell you how it happened and what we really learned about Memphis in this game. I learned a couple things. I want to talk about it right here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, right here in Memphis, Tennessee, going solo without my co-host Joe Mullinax on today after a game. So we'll be back for tomorrow's episode together. We're going solo today after the Grizzlies picked up a 108-100 victory against the Toronto Raptors. Much needed win, for the Grizzlies after two road games, some struggles against Chicago and whatnot. But the Grizzlies back victorious, back at 500 on the road. Like, despite all the things this team has went through this season, it's kind of hilarious because they're 16-27 overall, but the Grizzlies are now at 500 on the road. But today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Listen. Make every moment more right now. New customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you got to do is place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. We're going to get started on today's show talking about how the Grizzlies got this win against the Toronto Raptors. There was a lot of things that really impressed me. I mean, Jiren Jackson coming down the baseline with a nice dunk. Jaren Jackson Jr., what he did the first quarter that we're about to expand on here. John Canard, 5 blocks himself. The Grizzlies diamond the ball all around the floor. But at the end of the day, what today's episode will be centered around is the fact that even without Ja Morant, without Desmond Bane, without Marcus Smart, without Steven Adams, this team is starting to form an identity, so to speak. And here's the thing. I wrote about this at commercialappeal.com, so you can go check that story out as well. But what I said in that story is this season feels like 3 seasons in one, and you can pretty much put together what those 3 seasons are. The first season, it felt like was the first 25 games of the season without Ja. Everyone was just, okay, you just got to get through this, right? Ja will be back. You win at a certain level, and you can get to the play-in, get to the playoffs. So the Grizzlies started 6-19. Then Ja Morant gets back, and then they go 6-3 with Ja on the floor. Big wins too, beating the Pelicans, beating the Pacers, like some playoff caliber teams. And then, it happened so fast. After you beat the Los Angeles Lakers, Ja goes down, Dez goes down, Marcus Smart goes down, and it just the blows kept coming. Then you lose Jake LaRavia. On top of that, and now what we're seeing is the third edition of this Grizzlies season. Because some people will say, DeMichael, what's really different from now in the first 25 games? Well, I got a very simple answer for you. There's no Desmond Bane. Jaren Jackson Jr. is having to take an even heavier load than he did the first 25 games of the season. Because first 25 games of the season, the Grizzlies did a really good job. They'd stagger Dez, stagger Jiren. One comes out of the game, the other one would be in the game, so forth, except when, Jaren Jackson Jr. was in foul trouble or something like that. But now, Jaren really can't afford to get into too much foul trouble, and it's still happened lately. He actually picked up 3 quick fouls in the third quarter of this game, sat for a large part of the third quarter, and the Grizzlies, they held their own without him. The Grizzlies held the fort down. He came back in the game in the fourth quarter. Grizzlies took off a dominant win against the Raptors. But we got to focus on Jaren Jackson Jr. here in this first segment of Locked On Grizzlies because the blocks are down. We all know that. We've been seeing it. And there are a lot of reasons why the blocks are down. So, one, Jaren Jackson Jr. is being put in different defensive positions simply because what this team needs from him. But the biggest reason, this is just my opinion, based on what I've seen, based on just talking to Jaren, based on talking to some of the other players. I think Marcus Smart was one who pointed this out to me as well. But the biggest difference is Jaren doesn't have Steven Adams to kind of be that anchor while he freestyles around. It's a little bit different. When Steven Adams is on that back line, Jaren can go out and contest that shot and say, oh, well, if the guy gets past me, he got big Steven Adams at the rim waiting on him. So I don't care. I can take that risk trying to close out and block that shot when he's behind me. Or I can take that risk when I'm coming over, when I'm quote unquote out of position for a rebound. Jaren can't be out of position for too many rebounds right now because you don't have Steven Adams to kind of clear space and clean things up on that back end. So it's different. Well, what if I said the defensive impact is still very noticeable? And this game is a great example of why. Jiren Jackson Jr., before you could blink, like if you thought this game started at 7 o'clock because it was a 6:30 local start, if you thought the game started at 7 o'clock, you missed the franchise record. Jaren Jackson Jr. had 6 steals in the first quarter alone. 6 steals, in addition to 15 points. And I think, quite frankly, it was one of the more dominant two-way quarters we've seen a Grizzlies player have. Not just this season, but 6 steals in one quarter. And it was needed. Chicago was shooting. Not Chicago. Toronto was shooting the ball very effectively from the field in that first quarter. And Jaren, the Grizzlies won that quarter 30-25. And Jaren forced 6 turnovers via steals to kind of give the Grizzlies their edge. But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just that. Jaren continued to perform. He continued to take advantage of the size advantage he had. The Raptors guarded him with Scotty Barnes for a large part of this game. If you know Scotty Barnes, he's 6'7", but he has long arms. He's a very talented wing, can play the 3, can play the 4. More than anything, he's one of the best defenders in the NBA, without a doubt. And Scotty Barnes came into this game, with the block streak. I think he got Jaren really good with one block in particular. Like Scotty Barnes can play basketball. Like that dude is, as we say, he's one of them ones. And in this game, he had 6 blocks. Scotty Barnes had 22 points, 8 assists, 6 blocks. So again, I'm saying all this just to reiterate how talented a defender that guy is. Didn't matter against Jaren Jackson Jr. 12 of 22 from the field, 2 of 5 on 3-pointers. Hit him with the in, the out, the spin move, the power, the finesse. Finished the game with 27 points, 6 steals. But the most impressive stat to me, even more impressive than the 6 steals, that not maybe not more impressive than 6 steals in one quarter. That's a franchise record. Jiren Jackson Jr. had 5 assists in this game. And you may say, 5 assists, Damichael? Okay, yeah. Ja does that every game. Dez does that pretty much almost every game. 5 assists. What's so cool about 5 assists? Let me break it down to you. If you listen to me and Joe Mullinax before this season, specifically Joe Mullinax, because he talked about this a lot. Jaren Jackson Jr. rated as a terrible passer, terrible playmaker in all advanced statistical categories. Cleaning the glass had him rated as one of the worst passers, one of the worst playmakers at his position in the NBA last season. Jaren Jackson Jr. last season didn't have a game with more than 3 assists. In 3 of his last 4 games this season, he's had 5 or more assists. Let me say that again. Last season, Jaren Jackson Jr. didn't have one game. Not one game with more than 3 assists. Now, if you look at the Grizzlies' last 4 games, in 3 of them, he's had 5 assists, including this game. Now, he still had 4 turnovers. And Jaren's fighting that battle, right? One thing, I said it before the season. I think it was one of my bold predictions or big takeaways or whatever. But Jaren Jackson Jr., every year of his NBA career up to this point, he has had more turnovers than assists. Like, that's how bad the playmaking has been. He's had more turnovers than assists every single season up to this point. And guess what? It really wasn't close in a lot of those years. Like, it wasn't. But this year, it feels different. Because if you go through the past season of Jaren Jackson Jr.'s career, rookie year, 1.7 turnovers per game, 1.1 assists. 1.7 turnovers in year two, 1.4 assists. 1.4 turnovers in year three, 1.1 assists. 1.7 turnovers in year four. I mean, you get it. He's at 1.7 turnovers pretty much all these years. But basically, 1.1 assists again, 1.7 turnovers to one assist. And then there's this season. He's at two turnovers to 1.8 assists. But if you look at the total numbers, and that was going into the game against the Raptors. But if you look at the total numbers of the season, Jaren Jackson Jr. has 82 turnovers right now. He has 78 assists. That is an improvement. And, again, we're splitting hairs here. It's not the greatest improvement. It's not like he's Jokic, out there or whatnot. But still, it is a noticeable improvement because it's going to pay dividends when you see John Morant, Desmond Bane, and all those guys on the floor. But it's paying dividends right now for this team because Jaren is seeing so many bodies. He's quite frankly being forced to be a better playmaker because either you're going to shoot over double and triple teams or you're going to make the right correct pass. And he's doing a better job of it. I still do not think he's above average by any means. Don't get me wrong. It is still an area that he needs to improve in. But the process and the progress is there. You see the signs of Jiren Jackson Jr. becoming, a better so-called playmaker or whatnot. And if that's the case, then I think that really bodes well, not only just for Jaren, but it bodes well for the Grizzlies going forward this season and beyond this season. But we just talked about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s playmaking. Now we got to talk about Luke Kennard's playmaking because it looks a little bit different. Point Canard is running the show, and he did an exceptional job against the Toronto Raptors. So we're going to talk about that next coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, the NFL season is pretty much wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get a $150 bets in bonus bets guaranteed when you have a $5 bet. Again, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets if you win and place a $5 bet out there. That's $150. Like you win or lose. Like all you gotta do is place a $5 bet. But the FanDuel app is so easy to use. There are so many different ways to bet. You could do live same game parlays. You can do the bets in the new Explore tab that's available on FanDuel. You can make a parlay either in the parlay hub or you just cook it up yourself by just choosing certain props that you plan to use in your selection. So go to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. Coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about the one and only Point Canard. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I am Damichael Cole, right for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. And we got to talk about Luke Kennard because the shooting has been back for a while now. I don't know if you remember. Some of you may remember at the beginning of the season, everyone was freaking out. It was the preseason. Luke Kennard couldn't buy a three-pointer. Then everybody's like, it's preseason. Who cares? Doesn't really matter right now. Then the regular season started. He couldn't buy a three-pointer. And then he got hurt. And it was like, okay, he get some time to regroup, whatnot. He's Luke Kennard. He's led the league in three-point shooting the last couple of years. And he still couldn't buy a three-pointer when he first got back. But all of that is long in the past now. Luke Kennard, after yesterday's game against the Raptors, 8 consecutive games with multiple made three-pointers. Again, going back to the point about how this guy's turned it around. The 2 games before those 8 games, 0 for 4 shooting three-pointers in one of the games, 0 for 3 in the other game. So you talk about a 2-game stretch where Luke Kennard went 0 for 7 on three-pointers, and all he did was follow that up in the last 8 games, multiple made three-pointers. And he did so again in this game against the Raptors, 5 of 13 from three-point range. Got really hot there in the second quarter. Again, Jiren Jackson Jr., terrific first quarter. I said 15 earlier. He had 16 points in that first quarter. But it was Luke Kennard in the second quarter because, quite frankly, Jaren Jackson Jr. didn't score in the second quarter. He sat for a large part of it. I think he checked in with a little under 5 minutes left in the second quarter. Because, again, the Grizzlies were holding the fort down. But you know why they were holding it down is Luke Kennard. He finished the game with 19 points, 7 of 18 shooting, 5-13 on three-pointers. But he made 11 of those points came in the second quarter. So he was a big reason why the Grizzlies were able to hold it down during that stretch. But again, just like with Jaren Jackson Jr., the assist number is what stood out to me most with Luke Kennard. 7 assists in this game. And I'm going to be honest. Because we're allowed to do that on Locked On Grizzlies. I like to be honest, and I always tell everyone who's tuning in, make sure you like, rate, comment, subscribe, and be honest with us when you do all of those things. So I'm going to be honest right here. I wasn't really high on the whole playmaking Luke Kennard thing. I know Joe Mullinax touched on it, before this season, and he kind of touched on the fact that, he did some of this in Detroit. And I remember that. Luke Kennard's career high in assists is 4.1 in Detroit. But in my mind, I looked at that as, okay, it was a bad Detroit team. Someone had to create the assists, right? And if you look at every season since then, let's go to the numbers, because Luke Kennard is in his 7th season in the NBA, right? You're talking about this is year 7 for him. If you go to that third year, his third year in the NBA was with the Detroit Pistons, and that's when he averaged a career high 4.1 assists per game. If you take away that season, 1.7 assists as a rookie, 1.8 assists in year 2, 1.7 assists in year 4 after the 4.1 assists season in year 3, but 1.7 in year 4. Year 5, 2.1 assists per game. Year 6, last season, by the way, 1.5 assists per game. But here's the thing. Since that season in Detroit, since he's been in Memphis, he has shown the signs. And I remember Taylor Jenkins has talked about it a lot, about having Luke Kennard be, more of a secondary playmaker for this team. And last season, when we saw him make a whole bunch of threes in the 24 games that he played for the Grizzlies, he averaged 2.3 assists. That was at the time the most since his third season in 2019-2020 when he played with the Detroit Pistons and averaged 4.1 assists per game. Now, this season, going into that game against the Raptors, Luke Kennard was at 2.8 assists per game. And that number is only going to go higher as he continues to round into this role as the primary or more of the facilitator in this Grizzlies offense. So what we're seeing is everyone's getting involved, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Got to tease it a little bit, but specifically with Luke Kennard, again, I didn't buy it at first, but 7 assists against the Toronto Raptors, and he looks fine because there's natural gravity to Luke Kennard. Because I didn't really expound on why I wasn't a big fan of putting Luke Kennard in this primary facilitating role, because he creates real gravity off the ball. And we saw it so much last season. I go to that Lakers first round playoff series in particular, where Luke Kennard, quite frankly, didn't get up a lot of three-pointers in a bunch of stretches throughout that series. He had a couple good games. But for the most part, the Lakers did a terrific job of individually guarding Luke Kennard, being physical with him, and taking away the open looks that he easily had in the regular season with the Grizzlies. But if you looked at the net rating numbers, when Luke Kennard was on the floor, the Grizzlies were balling. So the thing is, the difference is the gravity that he creates. When Luke Kennard's on the floor, the opposing defense says, I'm not leaving him open. I got to stay attached to him no matter who drives on this side. I cannot leave Luke Kennard because he's one of the best shooters in the NBA, and he's led the NBA the last 2 seasons in three-point field goal percentage. That's what you got to tell yourself. Now when you put him on the basketball, as the great Kobe Bryant really, and when he said this, it really made so much sense to me. Talked about sometimes like with certain players, you put them on the basketball too much, you're allowing the defense to look right at them and set up and create, their defense how they want to do. So in this case, with Luke Kennard being off the ball, you can kind of sneak around the defense. You can, you can create those defensive miscommunications and breakdowns and whatnot. But when all eyes are on you, because you're taught, one of the first things you're taught in basketball is to watch the basketball, stop ball. And when everyone's eyes are on the basketball, you're not going to get as many open looks, and we're seeing that. Luke Kennard is still creating high quality looks, and he's a high quality elite 3-point shooter, so he doesn't need open looks really to make a lot of his shots. But I'm fine with the Luke Kennard playmaking role right now. I think, quite frankly, he is one of the Grizzlies' better options. We saw him make some pocket passes. We saw him play out of pick and roll. We saw him push the ball in transition. So all so far, so good. It's something I'm going to continue to monitor as the season goes on. It looks like Luke Kennard himself basically said, he's growing in the role and he's learning with it. It's different here. The Grizzlies play this kind of like free-flowing style of offense that allows someone like Luke Kennard to not think too much, and it makes it easier for you because you don't have to go through the typical point guard tendencies. A lot of guys on the Grizzlies team, they always tell me the offense is very interchangeable. That's why a guy like Luke Kennard or Desmond Bane can play point guard in a pinch, but they can also go to the small forward in the pinch as well because the 1 through 4 positions are very interchangeable. And because of that, Luke Kennard is kind of the de facto point guard right now with the Grizzlies. But all the playmaking is not falling on Luke Kennard solely. There's a lot of guys getting involved with the Grizzlies playmaking right now, and it really stood out in this game. We'll talk about that next coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Look, if you don't know by now, let me tell you what PrizePicks is. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And it's simple. I always say it's just you against the numbers. You're not battling other people, other players, pros and sharks. You simply pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. Let me give you 2 reasons why I like PrizePicks. Look, it's basketball season right now, and you can do combo projections across multiple sports because the NFL playoffs are going on right now. You can do a combo projection with the specials. And one of those combo projections that I like for example, you can do a LeBron James and Travis Kelce combo projection right now. Say you want to say 10.5 3-pointers and receptions combined between the 2 guys. You can do that on PrizePicks. Another thing I like about PrizePicks is the reboot policy. PrizePicks offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. Yeah, a lot of places aren't doing it, but at PrizePicks, they take care of you. Football and basketball games, for example, if you have a player who gets hurt in the first half and does not return in the second half, PrizePicks will say, okay, we got you. That player is rebooted from your stuff. And guess what? PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with the injury insurance policy out there. Go take advantage of all these terrific opportunities. All you got to do is go to prizepick.com/lockedon and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/lockedonnba. You get a first deposit match of up to $100. Coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about the playmaking of the Grizzlies as a team. It stood out against the Raptors, so we got to talk about that here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I am Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. If you haven't been tuned in throughout the show, let's recap some of the things that we talked about. If you have been tuned in, we're just going to sum it up real quick. Talked about Jaren Jackson Jr. shining in this game. 6 steals, 27 points to lead the Grizzlies. A very efficient shooting. Did it against Scotty Barnes, who had 6 blocks in this game, but is a really talented defender. Jaren is really starting to realize the size advantage that he has against these opponents. Luke Kennard stepping into this playmaking roles. The 19 points were cool. The 5 3-pointers made were cool. But 7 assists from Luke Kennard? The Grizzlies might have found something in terms of unlocking his playmaking potential a little bit more with this team. But speaking of the playmaking, it wasn't just Luke Kennard. It wasn't just Jaren Jackson Jr. with 5 assists. It was the whole doggone team. Every Grizzlies player that played had an assist. Of those 10 players, 8 of them had multiple assists in this win. And I'm telling you, the ball at times was moving like a hot potato. Only 2 guys, again, didn't have multiple assists. One was Gigi Jackson off the bench, who, by the way, had 7 points, 5 rebounds, 3 of 5 shooting from the field, and knocked down a triple. So he ain't complaining about him having 1 assist. Who cares? Because he also had a block and a steal. Vince Williams Jr. is the other player who only had 1 assist, but guess what? He had 18 points. He had 10 rebounds, so he threw in a nice double-double, as well as 2 steals and a block and 2 3-pointers made as well. So Vince Williams, very efficient day from the field. Uh, Gigi Jackson, very efficient day from the field as well. But in addition to those guys, Santi Aldama, 4 assists before leaving the game with right knee soreness injury. Taylor Jenkins, by the way, said that the Grizzlies are going to evaluate and go from here. But he sounded like it was very precautionary to take Santi Aldama out of that game. Said the team just made the decision at that point of the game. I think it was the third quarter to give Santi the rest of the game off. So with that being said, Santi Aldama 4 assists. Jaren Jackson Jr. we mentioned the 5. Luke Kennard we mentioned the 7. John Conchar, the other starter, had 4 assists as well. But you got 2 assists off the bench from Zaire, 2 from David Wright, 2 from Jacob Gilliard, 2 from Xavier Tillman Sr. Overall, as a team, the Grizzlies had 30 assists. That is only the third time the Grizzlies have reached 30 assists this season. Listen, I expect them to get close or potentially to reach 30 assists a few more times this season. Like, again, I said that's the third time. They should probably do that, I'd say 3 times within the next month or so. And you may be saying, Damichael, this team isn't that good offensively. What are you talking about? They don't have John Morant. They don't have Marcus Smart. They don't have Desmond Bane. How are they going to just churn out 30 assists? Well, let me explain. Here's the thing. The Grizzlies don't have a lot of shot creators right now. These guys are not one-on-one self-creators. So with that being said, everyone out there is creating for each other. So it's leading to more of that. I have to pass the ball to create for someone else, and I have to pass the ball to create for myself as well. Jiren Jackson Jr. is the one guy right now, and we've talked about how talented, for example, a guy like Gigi Jackson is. Gigi can go get a bucket. But you talk about consistently 10 seconds on the shot clock, everybody get out of the way. Jaren Jackson Jr. is the only guy right now that you trust wholeheartedly in that situation. Luke Kennard, no. That's not the strength of his game. It hasn't been at this point of his career. John Conchar, who was another starter in this game, it's not a strength of his game. Xavier Tillman, it's not a strength of his game. Zaire Williams, David Roddy, the list goes on. If you look at the advanced numbers, none of these guys profile as prolific isolation scorers. So, with that being said, what you see when you watch the Grizzlies is, one, you see a lot of transition opportunities. Grizzlies trying to get out of transition, create mismatches, create easy scoring opportunities. But when defenses get back and sit down, and make the Grizzlies earn it, Memphis is moving the basketball because that's how you get a defense out of position. That's how you create those advantages. You get those dribble drive opportunities because, yes, they can't. A lot of those players can't just, go 3 dribbles, spin move, fadeaways, and all that. But they can dribble drive. They can catch the ball, pump fake, get a defender out of position, and drive in a straight line or, drive right past a guy to either score or kick it out to an open teammate. And that's what we saw a lot of in this game. 30 assists on 44 made baskets. And trust me, you can take my word for it. You're going to see more of these type of performances simply because, one, they're emphasizing it. Taylor Jenkins said it after the game that that is, the assist part of this is a big emphasis for the team going forward. But it is a big emphasis for this team because it's how the Grizzlies can build their strengths going forward. This is not an isolation team. You don't have John Morant right now. if you don't have Desmond Bain. And I know I've said that a few times, and I know a lot of you are probably tired of hearing it because, but it is the reality, and it's probably going to be said a couple more times. But at the same time, there are still ways to create efficient offense. There have been teams historically in the NBA who have been some of the best offenses in the league without having, too many guys who can go out there and score on their own because you run offense, you create those drive and kick opportunities, and you play fast. The Grizzlies are doing all of that right now, and the Raptors, aren't a great team right now. They're in the middle of a shift. OG Anunoby is gone. Pascal Siakam's gone. They brought in a couple terrific players. I think RJ Barrett had 29 points against the Grizzlies and whatnot, but it's something the Grizzlies can build on. That's what we're talking about right here. Why we didn't talk about the Raptors specifically this much on this episode, because this is kind of, a self-improvement thing, for the Grizzlies going forward. So again, Jaren Jackson Jr. and Luke Kennard shined as playmakers, and so did many of the other Grizzlies, because that's how they're going to have to play. They're going to have to play real team ball in terms of that ball's going to be it's going to have to be like a hot potato, moving from hand to hand for the Grizzlies to maximize what they have available right now. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Make sure you take advantage of that. The first ever national sports 24/7 channel right here on the Locked On Sports Network, and you can go check it out on YouTube. Just go subscribe. And speaking of subscribe, make sure, if you haven't yet, or if your friend hasn't yet, if that other Grizzlies fan that you're always talking Grizzlies basketball with hasn't yet, tell them, hey, go check out that Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Everywhere you can listen, everywhere you can watch, Locked On Grizzlies podcast is there available for you and all the Grizzlies fans around the world. So make sure you continue to take advantage of that opportunity as well. We have plenty of terrific things coming up throughout the rest of the season. And remember, Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get podcasts. Until next time, I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.